Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace be unto you. Welcome to the Sajda Wendy Muhammad YouTube channel. And today is the state of Black business. And we're talking today about discovering, owning, and monetizing your authenticity. So sit back, grab you a cup of coffee or something, and we'll be right back.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee. And he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserved to be served besides Thee. And I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. Welcome this morning. I hope everybody is doing well. This morning, we're going to be talking about discovering, owning, and monetizing our authentic self, which is often a concept that is overlooked by many of us as entrepreneurs, primarily because we live and work in an environment where oftentimes our personality doesn't matter. Oftentimes who we are doesn't matter. It just matters what our skill set is, what we bring to the table, what we've been trained to do. And so we want to dig into that a little bit, because one of the challenges that I see oftentimes with many of the small business owners that I meet with, that they're struggling to go from technician to business owner, and it's that piece of authenticity that they're missing. And I can say that after working with we were working on counting it up over the weekend, somewhere around 12 to 13,000 entrepreneurs that I've been blessed to train and coach, and more businesses on a consulting level as well. Today, really, technically, is going to be my talk on chapter 5 of the book. You know, we've been going into the book as we begin to launch some of the work that I'm going to be doing for my upcoming book. So we've been going through the old book. So this is really chapter 5, and we're really talking about authenticity and developing your professional intuition. I'm doing it today because Thursday we're going to be on site at the brand new Al Noor studio. Queuing up a video here. At the brand new Al Noor studio with Brother Daryl and Brother Talib, Brother J. Kareem. So that'll be a little bit of a different show. Next week, and we have some other things Friday and Saturday. Next week, we're going to dive into corporate governance. Because what happens to a lot of us is that we start our businesses, we put it together, but we don't really quite know how to structure it. Okay. And I'm not talking about the legal structure. I'm talking about the operational structure. Some of us are in industries like healthcare, for example, that have certain requirements from a corporate governance standpoint. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But what I really want to share with you is how you set your business up in terms of your board, for example. Setting up a board of advisors, or a council board, or whatever you want to call it, and the decision and the impact of the decision to whether or not that board has operating authority, whether or not they have operating involvement, and how that affects your managers and your CEO. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how the relationship between your board and your management and your local supervisors and executives affects the overall integrity of the organization. A lot of times we put our companies together and we mimic what we see, right? And a lot of organizations become corrupt because of the relationship between the board and the operations. And then especially if you then have stakeholders, right? If you got stakeholders or shareholders, for example, I'll give you this quick example. If you have shareholders that the board reports to, and then underneath the board, you got your directors and your executives, right? If the board is involved in the day-to-day operations of your company, then it takes away the power of your managers and your executives, and then it actually corrupts the board, because the board can't really truly be accountable to your shareholders. Or if you want to say, well, my shareholders are my customers. I had a client the other day say to me, well, the way I look at it is my stakeholders or my shareholders are my customers. And she was very specific in the types of customers that she serves. And so she wanted her board to be able to bridge the gap between her shareholders or her customers and her operations team. And in order to do that, that board cannot be involved in day-to-day operations. It will just become corrupt. It's just inevitable because and so that's why a lot of boards are structured a certain way. You have committees. So we're going to talk about corporate governance. Oftentimes, as a consultant, I've been asked to come in and do corporate governance evaluations for people. And so when I come in and do the corporate governance, and I will do a whole write-up for you on some of the risks, how to mitigate it, where you are corrupting your board, excuse me, sometimes maybe by giving them too much power, too much day-to-day activity, or it may end up just be a compliance review. And when I say a compliance review, because you may be in a certain industry that requires that your relationship with your board and managers are a certain way. So we're going to dig into that a little bit next week, so that we can begin to think about those things as we're forming our businesses, and we can stop just mimicking what we see somewhere else. I'll save it. I've had a few questions this week from people, and I'm going to say this before we get into our talk today, where some of you have asked me what it is that I do, because and this is my fault. I take total blame for it, because I try not to be so heavy sometimes in the corporate business space when I come out here and talk to you guys. And so some of you, especially when we started announcing the financial trauma boot camp and some of the other things that I do, you may get me mixed up with like a motivational coach, although I do motivational speaking a little bit, or you may get mixed up with other people who are just talking about finances and business in theory, or they may be talking from a very limited perspective. And so we put together this little video to give you a little snippet and a little short overview of my background and what I'm bringing to the table when I'm having these conversations with you. Most of these people that call themselves business coaches and money coaches, they can't give you any insight into many of the things that I can give you direct insight and experience on. And that is what sets me apart from a lot of other people. And I don't mean it to bash or down other people. There's just levels to this. Okay. I think it was Meek Mill said there's levels to this ish. And that's what this is. These are levels. Okay. And literally I can look right at them and listen to them, although they may be very entertaining. They may have lots of little snippets that they pulled from other things. But when you start talking about being on a true level where you've built businesses, and it's just levels to it. That's all. I'm gonna leave it at that. It's just levels. So understand, when you hire somebody, when you listen to somebody, it's important now, because there's so much information out here, that you as the consumer understands what level is this person on. What level is it on? You know, is it a prosperity preacher? That's fine. Understand the level of that. Is it a financial advisor? That's good. Understand the level of that. Is it a business development and advisor like myself, which is great, but understand the level that you are dealing with before you pay your money. I'm not saying don't pay it. And I'm not one of these people that say don't listen to anybody else, because I'm a firm believer that you should be studying. You should be studying. Yep, you got your religious base, you got your spiritual base, you got those things that are helping you overcome some of the stuff that you're working on. But you should be studying. If you want to get better at communication, You got to find you a communications expert. Doesn't mean that somebody out here can't give you some good advice on it, but you need somebody that's good on communication. I can come out and talk to you about different corporate communication strategies and help you recognize that. Understand the levels. If a person is a marketing person, if the person is a advertising person, most people don't know the difference between marketing and advertising. If understand who you're talking to and who you're paying your money to. Okay. So when I come here and say to you, I'm doing a financial trauma boot camp, I want you to understand the level that I am on and the perspective from which I'm speaking to you. Okay. And I think a lot of times in my desire to be humble and in my desire to not make differences among us and not try to come off better or anything, because I know people take things the wrong way. I don't do a good job at giving you guys my resume and my background and the level that I'm on. And so oftentimes people will jump out and they'll take an exact subject and say, I'm going to teach this too. And that's fine. We could all teach the same subject, but you just have to understand the level with which it's coming from and the energy, okay, that you are tapping into. Okay. So before I show this video, don't forget about the Financial Trauma Bootcamp. I extended the sale. The $299 has been discounted. It is currently 50% off. So you can jump out there, because what I want you to do is I want you to bring a student with you. I really want to start pouring into our young people these corporate business strategies, because a lot of times when we talk business to our youth and we talk finances to our youth, we're talking about being a vendor. We're talking about having a small, right now restaurants are really popular in our community, and that's good. We need good places to eat. And since we all eat, it's a great way to make money. But there are other businesses besides restaurants and coffee shops that are needed in our community. So we want to talk holistically to our young people. We want to help them gain the tools so that they can get through this trauma and get into some intense healing. Because if we have trauma and if we are giving birth to our children and raising our children, 9 times out of 10, we're passing that trauma on to them. And most time you can tell by their behaviors. So I'm going to show this video, come back and talk a little bit, and then we're going to jump into authenticity. All right, so that's why I put that together, give you a little bit from a business standpoint of who I am. And especially when we start to go into some of these deeper subjects like corporate governance, you'll understand where I'm coming from. A lot of times, first thing what I do when I come into your business, I'll talk to you about how you're structured. How does your management function? How does management interact and bridge the gap? Is it management that bridges the gap between your customers and you as an owner? Do you have a board? Many of us have boards. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I was telling him, I said, your board is corrupted. He was like, what you mean? I said, because your board is responsible for day-to-day operations of your this person had an IT company, of your company. Therefore, they're going to be corrupted. It's inevitable. They cannot be unbiased because you're asking them to govern themselves. So they're governing over something that they're also responsible for. It's corruption is inevitable. So I was telling him, I said, if unless you are in a regulatory industry that requires that, in which then I'll show you how to take away some of the corruption. You may have the best people, the most well-intentioned people on your board, but they are corrupt now because you have them with oversight over your managers. He had he had 2 directors and 4 managers. So those 2 directors and those 4 managers report directly to people on the board. And the people on the board are actually carry titles in the organization that gives them governance over that aspect of the operations. So they're going to be corrupt because you're asking them to govern themselves. So he's working on taking the business public. So your potential stakeholders, your shareholders, the people that you're going to be reporting to, the VCs that have given you this money, are never truly going to get a real accurate reporting from your board, because your board is biased and corrupt because they also run operations. And he was like, whoa, nobody told me that. So we started talking to him about how to structure. He had enough people. A lot of times this happens because you just don't have enough people, right? It's you, and for so long you're a solopreneur, and then you bring on different people, and then you got to step back and start restructuring. But in his case, he had enough people because he was working with a VC firm to be able to restructure his board so that the board could be more unbiased and the organization could move forward faster. There was some fudging of financial data and reporting, people with emotional slants when it came to reporting to him and the stakeholders. And I said, well, that's only natural because they're governing themselves. It's because of how you have everything structured. And corruption's inevitable. So what I was explaining to him is that I said, if you get ready to go public, 9 times out of 10, you should not go forward and go public with your board structured like that. So we can talk, but we're going to go over that next week. Let's talk about owning and monetizing our authenticity. A lot of people look at this as a level or a subject that we talk about when we're just starting in business. This is something that we should be mindful of throughout our entire journey as professionals. Why is this important? I created this is not why it's important, but I'm going to just give you a little color on it, a little background. I'll do a better job at doing that kind of stuff. My background in this phase began as a little girl. I developed this style of coaching called authenticity coaching. That was just truly my way of coaching you. And it combines my professional experience with my artistry, with my spirituality, with really growing up and being programmed not to be a follower. That was a no-no in our house, to just be out doing stuff just because somebody else is doing things. And so taking all of that and putting that together, I created this coaching style called the Authenticity Coach, or authenticity coaching. And if you guys remember my early podcast, I had a podcast called The Authentic You. And I was the authenticity coach. And it was what I spoke from on that particular platform. Why is this important? And I want to give you a definition of authenticity that I think we can all relate to. Before I put that up there, let me say this. Being authentic, excuse me, is simply Bridging the gap between who you are and what you do. Many of us are doing something that we really don't want to do, but we're only doing it because it pays the bills. Or we're only doing it because it's the only job that we can find. Or we're only doing it because we've just done it for so long, it's all we know. And once you start to move into those kind of spaces, there becomes a lack of authenticity. There's nothing to panic about. Doesn't mean you got to run out and make a change today. It just means that you have to start working on how do you discover and monetize who it is you are. Because the ultimate dream, right, is to be able to just be yourself. To get up, do what you love, and get paid and sustain yourself and become wealthy being yourself. That's the ultimate dream, right? So if you love playing the piano and that's who you are, and you love expressing yourself and finding all the different creative ways in which you can monetize being a pianist, that's a dream, right? Some of us are afraid to move into authenticity because we've been doing something for so long. And what we've done for so long brings a certain amount of power, brings a certain amount of familiarity. And so we just don't know what else we should do. But we find ourselves becoming diseased, becoming discombobulated, confused, uncomfortable, because we don't know who we are anymore. And we don't know who we are in relation to what we get up and do every day. We lose our personality or lose ourselves in what it is that we do. And that sounds very noble and it sounds really good. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult for a lot of people to function like that. It takes a very, very special person. And oftentimes, let me say it this way, the goal is ultimately to lose yourself, but you want to lose yourself in the right way. That's deep, right? You don't want to lose yourself because there's so many other powerful people around you that you don't know who you are anymore. You don't want to lose yourself because you've been working a job or volunteering there for so long that you don't even know who you are anymore. You've stopped growing and developing. So you don't want to lose yourself because you stopped personally growing and developing and you stop healing. You want to lose yourself because you've healed and grown and developed so much that now you become a blend of the flow, right, between yourself and those that you serve, and ultimately the God that you're on the way back to. That's a whole nother thing. Here we go. Authenticity expresses the degree of a person's self-identity, and at the same time, it shows how much is their behavior towards their surrounding connected to their self-concept. Simply stated, bridging the gap between who you are and what you do. Okay? Let's keep going here. It's acting in accordance with your true self. And being authentic means behaving in congruence with your values, your beliefs, your motives, and your personality dispositions. This one to me is really, really important. Bridging the gap between what you do and who you are. Acting in accordance with your true self. First, of course, you got to discover who you are, right? You got to discover your authenticity. And it means behaving in congruence with your own personal values. Oftentimes we work jobs where we're required to do things that are different from what we value. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong. It's just that it just don't mean that much to you. You're just not really into it. It's like being into politics and you don't really like politics and you don't really care about it, and it's not that really important to you. That's what I mean by a value. Your beliefs. Now, this is where you may be required to do something on your job that's against your belief system. I know people who are Muslims who own liquor stores. You got people who are Muslims who are in the vaping business. They smoke. Um, you have people in you have people in business who work for somebody and it's corrupt and they're doing things that are illegal and it's against their belief system. And you may say, well, how is that possible? Because maybe they don't know. Maybe they work for a company that's poisoning the water. I'm sure that's against their belief system, but they don't know, or and their values, but they may not know. Some people know. This is being, this is finding that congruence. What are your motives? What is it that you want in life? A lot of times you may have a corrupt motive, but your company may be good. I see a lot of that. A lot of people trying to get over. And so they go into a sales position and they got a motive. And some people have to completely alter their personality. So their personality disposition is in jeopardy. So let's go back to whether or not something is authentic. Let's say you collect designer bags like I used to, and you start to know the characteristics of whether or not a bag is authentic. Okay. For one, you know the company and you know what styles they make. A lot of people that come out with fake bags, or you see a person carrying a bag that may say have the LV on it that says Louis Vuitton, but Louis Vuitton don't even make that kind of bag. See, some of y'all make that kind of mistake when y'all not being, when you carrying your, you know, your fake bags and stuff. But the girls who know the authentic bags know. And they know what they're looking at. They know if you say to them, you know how when you go to New York and you're going down Canal Street and they start telling you, come look at these bags and check out these bags. Some of them have bags in their hands. Well, you should know the authentic bags that Gucci makes, YSL, whatever. You should know Louboutin. So when you look at whatever kind of bag they got, you should be able to say, they don't even make that. Because that's how you're going to know whether or not your collection is authentic. It's the same in the antique world. You know the origin of it, and the origin is undisputed. It's genuine. It's like saying genuine leather. Leather, unfortunately, comes from animal skin, and so you know, okay, this is genuine because it comes from such and such kind of animal. It's not leather-like. It's not leatherette. It's authentic. So an undisputed origin. I used to work with this guy it seemed like every time I got a project, I would look up and I would see him. And he was so funny. He was very Puerto Rican from New York. Everything about him was Puerto Rican. His accent, when we would go to a client and he bought his lunch and heated his food up in the refrigerator, you smelled those, not in the refrigerator, in the microwave, you smelled those Puerto Rican spices all over the office. And he was funny. He had that his jokes were Puerto Rican. Everything about him was Puerto Rican. And he was a joy to work with because he was so authentic. His origin was just undisputed. He wasn't watered down. It was just who he was. And he was a powerhouse at what he did. And so when he was on the team, not only was he good at what he did, he was authentic. He had his professional intuition intact. He always was up on his technical jargon and he could help problem solve. He was amazing, but he was undisputably Puerto Rican. And I use that as an example because I oftentimes wondered, I remember one time being on a project with him and I just wondered, I said, I wonder if his excellence at his job has to do with the fact that he's able to be his undisputed, authentic self. Because part of wrapped up in who he was is that technical stuff that he did for the client, that was him too. And so he was kind of able to pour all of that and mix all of that together. And so he wasn't schizophrenic, as I say, no offense to anybody who's schizophrenic, like a lot of us. where especially a lot of us in our community where we code switch a lot. Um, a lot of us code switch not only in the vernacular that we use and the manner in which we present ourselves and how we speak, but we code switch in terms of how we think and who we are. Interesting, right? But a lot of us are big time code switchers. Don't get me wrong. When you go into a certain environment, if you're running for president of the United States, you probably are not going to act the way you act at home with your children and your family. But how much code switching are you doing here? That's where most of the entrepreneurs in our community that I meet with struggle, because there's a lot of mental code switching going on and not even being aware that they're doing it, and not even knowing that it's okay not to do it. Right? It used to be when you came into the corporate world, they would tell you to take communication classes if you had a certain accent. Like if you had a Southern drawl or a real strong East Coast accent or a strong West Coast accent, they would tell you, go take communication classes so you spoke more like a Midwesterner, kind of more down, straight down the middle. And so when we would take things like our speech classes and stuff like that, a lot of us who were from the Midwest that had that pure, what they call Midwestern accent, were considered the standard, but it was fake. I learned how to code switch as young as when I was 13 or 14 years old. I used to work for a telemarketing company. We used to do outbound telemarketing. And so I had to learn how to be articulate and formulate my words so that when we would call people up on the phone trying to sell people things, they wouldn't, for one, know that we was 13 years old or 14. I think you were supposed to be 14 to work there. I was 13. But I did that all through junior high and high school. That was kind of my job until I started working at Target. But the point being is learning how to speak and speak with a certain vernacular so that people would feel comfortable. Because in this corporate world that we are in, oftentimes we're not allowed to be ourselves. And so for many of you, when you come to me, you're coming out of the corporate world into owning your own business, and you're trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between being a technician and an entrepreneur. And one of the first things we got to do is dismantle some of the code switching to help you become a little bit more authentic and a little bit more relatable to your staff, more relatable to your board, most importantly, more relatable to your customers. Okay. So being authentic is when something is authentic, it is of undisputed origin, genuine. When you're struggling to figure out who and what a thing is, it may not be authentic. Now, some people may be culturally mixed. Some people may be cultural hybrids. And I'm not saying that you got to pick one or over the other. But what I am saying is that you got to start practicing and figuring out who you are and how you bring your whole self to the table. I used to do a thing that I used to call very schizophrenic, where I would bring part of myself to the table. So when I go to work, I had corporate Wendy. I had this whole personality and this persona that I developed that I would call corporate Wendy. And then I had spiritual Wendy. that most times I would leave at home, and I wouldn't let, or I would just bury her, and I wouldn't let people on the job see her because I was worried about what people would think. And I'm not talking about being a religious bully or a Bible thumper or anything like that. I'm not talking about that, being a religious bully. I'm just talking about being your spiritual self. And for me, I operate, my whole life is based in spirituality, including my business. So a lot of why I was even getting projects was due to my spirituality. A lot of how well I was doing on these projects was due to my spirituality. But yet I was limiting myself and pinching myself off from my greatness because I didn't want nobody to know that every few hours I was going in the room and praying and meditating. Not that it was, yeah, it's private. I ain't got to just jump down and start doing what I do or make an announcement, but I was hiding it. And even when I grew into just going, I got more I want to do. I got more I want to contribute. I got more that I want to be, and I got to work on being my authentic self. And I started asking God to help me with that. He started giving me heavy assignments where I had to bring all of me to the table in order to solve certain problems, and all of me to the table in order to make something happen. And when that started to happen, the code switching stopped. I was much more effective as a business person and as a consultant because I could just bring all of me. I could bring myself to the table as a community person, as a spiritual person, as a business person. And one of the challenges that I have now that I talked about at the beginning of the show was because people pick. I have this issue in relationships too, where people will pick up. I think I like corporate Wendy. Nah, you know what I mean? I like spiritual Wendy. Or I like this person. Or people do the opposite. Some people go, I like the corporate side, but I don't like all this other stuff. And I'm not going to hire her because I don't like all this other stuff. So you get a lot of that sometimes. You get some people who say, I'm going to compete against spiritual Wendy because that's all I can see. Or I'm going to compete. You know, they pick different aspects of your personality. That is the risk and the reward of being who you are, being authentically yourself. Because, for example, what a person would get, I was explaining this to somebody the other day. We were talking about corporate governance, and I said, let's say you put me on your advisory board. I'm going to be very clear to you all. This is what you get. And I'm going to add so much value because I'm going to be able to bring my authentic self to your board. And I have a certain technical expertise and a certain professional business savvy that is enhanced by my authentic self. And that's what you get. You don't get just a technician. Because if all you need is just a technician, then maybe I shouldn't be on your board. Maybe I should be a director in the company or a manager in the company. I'm just using these as examples. Because here we get into this thing where if I'm an IT person and I'm over the IT operations of the companies, should I be sitting on the board? Can I be biased if there's an IT outage, if there's an issue? Am I going to be speaking into the limitations of my department and my team members, or am I going to truly sit here and be innovative without thinking about implementation in that creative process? When we start thinking about implementation, that's when we get into deployment. and we start bringing in the developers and the directors and the other people within the organization, because now we're into deployment, and now we're trying to figure out how do we deploy this thing. But on the board level, we have to be unbiased and be able to push forward. And that's the reason why I would say to people, your board members have to be authentic, and they have to be savvy. They have to be business savvy people to help you figure out how to push your business forward. But you want them to be authentic, because authentic people are going to bring more holistic people or holistic ideas, and they're going to be more holistic when there's decision making that needs to be made. So you want to begin with their business savvy. Okay. So you want that, but you want them to be as authentic as possible in terms of who they are as a person, because that they're going to bring to your board and you're going to get the benefit of it. Why? Because in your authenticity, you're going to have access to certain customers. You're going to have a footprint across the world, if you will, that maybe nobody else has. So when you're allowing those board members to bring their authentic selves to the table, you're expanding the depth and breadth of the insight of your company. We're going to talk more about that. What else? We may struggle to be authentic due to lack of self-esteem, fear of judgment by others, and a strong desire for others to like us. That is what I was dealing with. When you go into a lot of these corporate environments, it can be very sterile. Some of you may not have ever experienced this, but oftentimes it can be very sterile. And when I say very sterile, meaning kind of like one-track pony. Everybody's got the same personality. Folks all dressing alike. But this is what I think hurt a lot of big companies and is still hurting them today, because there's no, and I know this is such a bad word nowadays, but there's no diversity on the board. And diversity means culturally. It could be color. It could be gender. It could be thought processes, mental strategies, the way a person operates. I always encourage people that if you want some diversity on your board, you bring in somebody like me, because I'm going to give you a way to think more holistically. I'm bringing who I am as a cultural person to your team, which is going to help you think in a broader way so that your board better reflects the customers that you serve or the potential customers that you're serving. So authenticity is important. Oftentimes we struggle because of our lack of esteem, lack of self-esteem, our fear of judgment. A lot of times these are trauma responses. And we're going to talk about that in the financial boot camp, okay? Financial trauma boot camp, because it's these trauma responses that oftentimes are messing us up, that are impacting our ability to earn. What does that mean? I have talked to so many incredible leaders, people who are so smart, but they're struggling financially. Why? Because they're dealing with trauma related that has impacted their self-esteem. They're worried about being judged. They're worried about other people liking them. But then they're real strong in who they are and say, well, I don't know how to be nothing else. Well, let's talk about that. Let's unravel some of this trauma so that we can help you figure out how to monetize who you are. That's why this boot camp is so important, because it's going to begin us on the road of healing around our finances. I do coaching around money psychology, where we literally unravel your relationship with money. Literally, we unravel it. We'll go back to the very beginning and determine how it started. And then I'll give you some tools to help you unravel it The goal is always getting you to a more authentic place. And in that authentic place, you can think straight. You don't have to question your thoughts. You don't have to question your feelings. You don't have to question what it is that you genuinely want to do because you're in an authentic space. See, what creates trauma is that we're constantly second guessing ourselves. We're constantly wondering if we're right. We're constantly going out into the world and feeling uncomfortable or embarrassed. It's embarrassing to not have any money. It's embarrassing to be criminalized because you just don't have the money. It's embarrassing to be criminalized because you can't find a job, or because your business has dried up, your money has left you. It's traumatizing, and so in that trauma, it impacts our behavior, and then all of a sudden we aren't our authentic self. And so if we can find a way to get through that trauma and get back to our authenticity, or discover our authenticity, we can begin to heal from some of this trauma, and we'll make better decisions. We'll make better moves. We'll do differently in terms of what we're demonstrating to our youth and our children. That's the reason why we're offering the discount, okay? So that in offering the discount, you guys can bring your children. You can bring the youth. We want to talk about generational wealth, but we're forgetting about the generational trauma, especially the generational financial trauma. We're talking about generational youth. And so we go, well, let's get an insurance policy. Let me go see a financial advisor. Let me leave them $1 million. Let me leave them this land. Let me do this. Let me figure out how they're going to divvy up all my assets. And then you wonder why it don't even take them a whole generation and they squander it. It's because you also passed on your trauma. You left them with the trauma. And some of y'all may be saying, I ain't got no trauma. I ain't got no financial trauma. I got money. I got my insurance policies in place. I ain't leaving my children that trauma. Okay. All it takes is to study history. This is why you see a lot of wealthy people say, well, I'm not leaving anything to my children. I'm leaving it all to charity, because they don't want it to be squandered. This is why the great people in the business world, the men who built America, you'll see where they'll leave some to an endowment and then some to their family and children. And they structure things in a certain way because they know that they've passed down financial trauma. What I'm saying for us is, let's be more holistic. Let's be authentic. Let's work on our own healing so that we're not passing that trauma on to our youth. How are we passing it on to our youth? Because oftentimes words don't teach. We can talk. People are yapping all day long. Our children, our youth are numb to the talking. Folks are talking at them and been talking to them all their lives. They're from this digital era. It's just talk, 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 talk. They go to church and there's talking. They go to mosque and there's talking. They go to grandma's house and there's talking. They're in the house with us and there's talking. They turn on the TV and there's talking. They get on the internet and there's talking. Talk, talk, talk. Pretty soon, it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher's voice. Wah, 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 wah. We have to show them. They have to see us achieving. They have to see us and the manner in which we make decisions. We have to demonstrate that to them. How do we handle relationships? How do we handle and show people how to love us? How do we make financial decisions? On the first of the month, are we out running around slamming doors and just partying it up? Is that what we do? Are we sitting down? Do they see us with a budget? Do they see us deploying certain strategies? Do they see us making certain decisions? Have we involved them in that decision making? Have we allowed them to just roll with us so that they can just see how we move? How do you handle somebody on the street that approaches you a certain way? How do you handle it in a business when you have to go in and order something? How much are your children with you so that they actually see the foundational mechanisms with which you achieve? Or are you so caught up in your trauma and your struggle, and they've been watching you at the same level all their lives, and they don't know how to get out that box, get to that next level? They go to college, you manage to get them to school, they get out of school, and guess what? They slowly start tipping back into your way of doing things. And then next thing you know, you die, you leave them the house, you leave them the car, you leave them the insurance policy, and it's gone in a year. How do we prevent that? We got to work on some of this trauma. We got to work on some of this trauma. So we're going to do that in the financial trauma boot camp. And that's why I say authenticity can heal trauma. Some of us just have to stop pretending. And our youth are watching us pretend. They're watching us pretend. And they're going to have some kind of trauma response, whether it means that they're going to go so far that they're going to say, look, I'm never going to pretend and I'm going to be so authentic. It just depends. But they're going to have some kind of trauma response. And before we go, the last thing that happens, once we start to become authentic, once we begin to study, we start to develop what we call professional intuition. Okay. Our authenticity, our experience, and our knowledge support the development of professional authenticity. And that's what we covered in chapter 5 of the Mind of an Entrepreneur book. The book's available on Amazon. I encourage you to go out there and get it. Y'all, I ran out of time. Let's see. I see a few comments in here. I see Sister Betty said, good morning. I gave y'all a little note. Don't forget the love offering. Morning salutations from Nubia Latifa. Walaikum salam, Brother Robert. I see you have a question. How can we recognize if we are in denial of having this financial trauma? So if you look at the video that I showed, I talked about some traits. If you're spoiled, if you are in denial, sometimes you're just in denial about debt and about bills. Sometimes you're lying to yourself. You're making yourself think, I'm doing okay. I'm good. That's a trauma response. Sometimes when you get a bill or money is spent, you get emotional. You get upset. You find yourself getting angry or nervous. That's a trauma response. If you find yourself excessively spoiling your children because you didn't have anything, that's a trauma response. Okay. If you've had chronic or generational poverty, that's a trauma response. You can develop trauma responses if you grew up. I grew up pretty solid middle income, middle America type of family. But when I got in college, I started to become familiar with financial struggle and what it meant to not have money to be able to do the things that I needed to do. That created trauma. Okay. If you've gone through a divorce, 9 times out of 10, that's going to create trauma, or it's from trauma. If you've experienced eviction or foreclosure or a near foreclosure, again, financial trauma. If you find yourself in a position where when you owe somebody something, it becomes very difficult for you to talk about it, that's a trauma response, or an avoidance of trauma response. If you find yourself overly giving too much, doing too much, just going overboard, that's a trauma response. So there's 9 times out of 10, nobody in America, especially nobody that is of color, that does not have some form of financial trauma that they need to work through. Wrong hand. They need to work through in this financial trauma boot camp. Does that help? Let me know if that helps. I'm going to get ready to go and get out of here. I'm going to play 2 videos on our way out that I want you guys to take a look at. Brother Robert 11X Minor asked a question about financial trauma. In this video that I've been playing for you guys, it actually goes over how to know if you are dealing with financial trauma. And so I want you guys to just stop for a minute and look at it very closely. Okay. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to play the video about who I am. And so that you begin to know where I'm coming from and who I am when I'm teaching you this financial trauma boot camp, because there's a lot of people out here teaching some of these same concepts. I'm not saying that nobody's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is that you as a consumer need to know perspective. Okay. Let's see. We got Brother Robert said, I need help. Okay. If you need help, Brother Robert, come to the Financial Trauma Boot Camp. It is 50% off right now. So it's no longer $299. It's half of that, 50% off. And I want you to bring a young person with you. Find a relative, a niece, a nephew, a daughter, a son, a student, somebody that you know that you can bring with you, or somebody else that you know that can't afford it. Y'all go in on it together and get together and attend the boot camp together. Log in together and sit there together. All right. Okay, so the 2 videos, don't go anywhere. Take a look at these 2 videos because I want you to be informed. And I will see you all Thursday. We're going to be live from Al Noor Studios right here in Chicago. You don't want to miss it. All right. Peace and blessings, family.